So now that you've all learned how to do vertical asymptotes and horizontal asymptotes, we're going to put all that information together and we're going to completely graph this function right here, f of x equals x minus 4 over x squared minus x minus 6. So the first thing I think we can do is we can find, let's say, where the x-intercept is. Now that should be pretty easy. The x-intercept is going to be when the numerator is 0. And so the numerator is 0 exactly when x minus 4 is 0, which is going to be at x equals 4. So that's pretty easy, and that's a good start. Now the second thing we have to do is we have to figure out where the vertical asymptotes are. Now, to make it a little easier, perhaps we should rewrite our function by factoring out the bottom first. So we write x minus 4 over, and we can factor out the bottom by x minus 3 and x plus 2. So we see that the denominator is 0 at 3 and at negative 2. And at both of those points, the numerator is not 0, which is exactly when we have a vertical asymptote, when the denominator is 0, but the numerator is non-zero. So that means I have vertical asymptotes at x equals 3. Just fix that. X equals 3 and x equals negative 2. Okay, and now similar to when we graphed polynomials, what we want to do is we want to plot all of these important x values on a number line, and we want to test for when the function is going to be above and below the graph. So we put on a number line these important values, and so we have an intercept at 4 and asymptotes at negative 2 and 3. So there's negative 2, there's 3, and there's 4. Now negative 2 and 3 are asymptotes, so I just want to remind myself of that with the dotted lines, and 4 is an intercept. Now just as before, we need to test values in between each region. So to the left of negative 2, let's try negative 4. So if I plug in negative 4, that's negative. Plug in negative 4, that's also negative. Plug in negative 4, that's also negative. That's 3 negatives. That gives us a negative. Between negative 2 and 3, I can plug in 0, and you get negative, negative, positive, which gives me a positive. Between 3 and 4, how about 3.5? Okay, so 3.5 minus 4 is negative, 3.5 minus 3 is positive, and 3.5 plus 2 is also positive, so negative, positive, positive, that gives me negative. Now a number in this far region is a number greater than 4, let's say 10, okay. So plug in 10, 10 minus 4, 10 minus 3, 10 plus 2, those are all positive, great. So far what I've got going on here is I've got my function, and I have that at negative 2, I have a vertical asymptote, and at 3, I also have a vertical asymptote, and at 4, it hits 0. Great. Okay, I suppose that asymptote could have been drawn a little bit better. Okay. Now, what we want to do finally is we want to figure out what is the horizontal asymptote. Okay, and the way we did that was we figured out the leading term on the top and the leading term on the bottom. Okay, so the end behavior says that f of x acts like the top leading term divided by the bottom leading term as x goes to plus and minus infinity. Now as it turns out, when you go to plus and minus infinity, x over x squared is actually going to look like 0. So it's kind of like my asymptote, my horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. So I have this dotted line going along here. Okay, and now we just got to put all the pieces together. So in the first region, I'm negative, and I'm following this horizontal asymptote and a vertical asymptote. So how am I going to be negative following this asymptote and that asymptote? Well, the only way I could be negative following the asymptotes is like so. And now we go to the next region. Okay? Now, in the next region, between -2 and 3, okay, I'm positive. I'm positive and I have to follow this asymptote and that asymptote. Notice I have no x-intercepts in between, so it's just going to be positive the entire time following both asymptotes. So the only way to do that is to do something like that. Okay? In the last region, or the last two regions, I want to be negative following this asymptote here, and then I also want to hit 0, and then after that I want to be positive, but then I need to follow this asymptote out here, out towards infinity. So I follow the vertical asymptote, I hit 0, and then I follow the horizontal asymptote out towards infinity. And that's the basic idea that you'll need to get started on the rest of the problems.